Thanks for tuning into the Hidden Tracks podcast. You can find us wherever you find podcasts or listen to music. When you have an opportunity, please give us a 5-star review, write a little note, tell us how we're doing. We really appreciate it. It helps us keep this thing going. If you want to reach out to us, you can find us at Facebook at Hidden Tracks. Instagram is at HiddenTracks99, and if you'd like to send in submissions or talk to us or give us any feedback about what we're doing, our email is myhiddentracks99@gmail.com. Thank you so much again for tuning in, and I hope you enjoy the show. What's up, everybody? Another week, another edition of the show. This week I have Josh from 6 Going on 7 and Attempt Survivors and so many other things. He's also got a bunch of solo albums out. He's been doing this for quite some time, and it's just an absolute pleasure to have someone who was a part of a very influential band in my life, and quote unquote on the line they're calling it a band's band, but I actually had a conversation with someone about 6 Going on 7 the other day. I think you and I probably know the person very well, but it is an absolute honor and pleasure to have you here today, Josh.
Hey man, I really appreciate it, Shane. Thanks for having me.
So there is, I mentioned that the band's band, but the conversation I had was with a friend, Craig Ciarnelli, from LMA and Hidden Cabins and Painted Fiction and all these other bands. And we were talking about 6 Going on 7 came up randomly. It's funny how the world works. It came up randomly, and then I get an email about having the opportunity to interview, and I'm just like, the world is fucking crazy. That's but yeah. we're talking, and I'm like, I think other bands and other musicians and things that I was doing and other bands were doing at the time, it was like we kind of put you on this pedestal of fuck, we're never going to be that good. So what are we doing? It was just one of those things that was like, as soon as we saw you, it was like, oh, uh-oh,
That's
we got
really
to
funny.
rethink this.
Yeah, I don't know that we ever thought of ourselves as, the band's band moniker thing is so kind of ironic, but what it tends to indicate often, and I'm sure if James and Will were on here with me, we'd laugh about it, is a band that has some sort of, some sort of collective, what am I trying to say? Not collective, but some sort of local love or regional love or what have you, but it's not like a big selling band. There were always bigger bands, and there were always bands that seemed to like check other boxes for people in New England. But I felt like we had the band's band thing was the number of people that we played with over the years that were aware of the band or that liked a particular album kind of, I think, spoke to that idea. And we were just primarily nerding out, spending all of our what would be social lives making music in a rehearsal space for the love of it. I mean, we had balance and we had other things going on as well, but that was it was a real heavy focus for us because our collective ego, which I felt like we had a lot more than like individual, was just that we wanted to be as good as we could be and kind of push ourselves constantly and be the sort of band that shared the stage, on occasion with bands that we felt like were getting a lot of attention, and we just kind of wanted to, be consistent and be kind of be whatever we were supposed to be, but through hard work and not hype. So,
well, I think one of the biggest things about that whole era and time frame of music creation and everything was there were so many bands that did kind of stand on their own 2 feet, and they almost couldn't be put into like the best part about that time, and I'll say like the mid to late 90s and early aughts, where there were so many different styles of bands on bills that you'd get to go to these shows. There'd be 4 or 5 bands, and they're all different, and like you can't honestly put them into like a category. And I think it's kind of a great thing, but also at a time when there's bands such as 6 Going on 7, it could sometimes be a detriment because there's nothing else that really sounds like that. Yeah, you can kind of fit with something else, but you're kind of just your own sound and your own band. Did you ever feel like maybe that could have slowed the progress a little bit because you really didn't? And I mean, I don't know if I have the greatest musical ear, but there wasn't another band that I would say that sounds exactly like that.
Yeah, I mean, to be fair, full disclosure, everybody's got their influences. They've got their things that they're ripping off and trying to sort of like mask, be it like consciously or subconsciously, but it's so funny. I definitely think that as we were developing things, we didn't sound like a ton of bands in New England at the time that I would consider, I don't know if peers is the right term or whatever, but like bands we played with, like there was such a and really good variety. It was really interesting, but from like a piebald to like a cave in to a converge to a, karate. I mean, now we're kind of like leaping a few years here and there, but that idea, they're just, none of those bands really sound the same, in some ways, we were all kind of in this little, I don't know exactly how to explain the time, but it felt we were kind of in these little incubators doing these things and bumping into each other from time to time. And we were adjacent and we had some crossover influences and such, but it was such an interesting scene, in that regard.
Absolutely. And I think a lot of times too, like being in that area and being in sort of like a pocket where there are bands just trying new things and taking different things from their influences, but you're all being friends and everybody, succeeds on their own little thing that they're doing is awesome, and that was a time that was very productive. And there were so many awesome bands that came out that sounded so different than each other. And yes, they may not have had the global success of, say, another little pocket, which was like Sacramento, where you had Deftones, Far, and Cake, and they all like they became household names and stuff. But this was all the bands that you just named are to myself and a lot of other people, are household names, just not along the lines of the $1 million paycheck ever seen.
Yeah, yeah. And, like I grew up in Oregon and in Portland specifically, pretty
The
much like
cleanest dirty city I've ever been to.
the cleanest city. Yes, yes.
There's
It's
you won't see trash, you won't see anything, but you just feel like you're dirty walking around. Yeah, that's
yeah,
why
it's
it's called.
it depends on the season. But yes,
Yeah,
right now in December, or I guess no, November
November.
19th, we're pretty it's pretty gray.
Yeah,
There's no question, if you ever wonder like why the sort of like Elliott Smiths and such come out of areas like this, you just need to walk around for like 20 minutes in the rain and you're like, oh, that song makes perfect sense now. um, but yeah, man, I definitely feel like I was ripping off the stuff that I was influenced by in the Pacific Northwest, being very bass heavy. And then, like Will was super into, he knew all of like the Discord stuff, and we had some cross pollination there, and we loved that. But he and I also really loved like like Depeche Mode and
yeah,
Cure. Those were huge, huge, huge bands for both of us, like then and now. And then he was also into all that stuff in like Bitch Magnet and things like that in Virginia, in that area that were kind of going on, kind of the I guess pre Polvo and pre, those sort of
yeah.
things. Little mathier than most of what I like, but he was really into that, and it informs a lot of his drumming, and it made sense. And then he and James loved like Rush, which I hated, but I don't hate them, but it's just like one of those
No,
things where
yeah, it's one of those things you just don't understand at that
I
time
just
too.
pushed back. I
Yeah,
pushed
yeah,
back hard, and then James and I, of course, bonded over like just sort of big arena rock because he's a Texas kid, and then he's got the jazz influence, and I have a little bit of that, but he has like the studied jazz influence, like music school. Actually knows what he's talking about rather than fucking my 2 cents, my elementary level referencing Miles Davis or John Coltrane, and he's like, yeah, okay, kid, you know. Anyway, but yeah, those things all played into everything we were doing, and ultimately, I think we just had this thing where we tried a bunch of stuff. I mean, there's hours and hours of like practice tape things and like rehearsals where I'm like, I don't even remember what that song was. And we demoed, not because we were perfectionists, but just because of the timeline, and it was so contained, and it all kind of happened so quick when it started happening that I think we demoed like 9 songs or something to that effect that never made it on anything. Maybe demo, like maybe a few early demos, but effectively like in official release capacity, if you start like at Hydra Head and you end at the Doghouse record that
yeah.
didn't appear on any of those things, there's like 9 songs, maybe more, so almost another album's worth.
Well, how does it feel like now that, so many years later after, things dissolved, that there's still tons of interest in what you had once done, with Iodine wanting to release, when they released Self-Made Mess and all these things, like what is that feeling that you get when someone reaches out and says, hey, listen, we love this and we want to bring it back out now and today?
Yeah, I mean, I think I'm not I'm not tender about that stuff, in that I really I appreciate anybody that enjoys any portion of anything I've done. you know, I just think that like the older I get and the longer I go with things, it's just kind of cool to be like, everybody's going to have their favorite thing or era or thing that they glom onto. I've got my ideas of what I perceive as the best eras of Six Going on Seven, and those are like wildly different than somebody else. And you know what I mean? It just goes
Yeah.
on and on. So I'm always grateful. I think it's super cool. I think they did a great job, like aesthetically, and it sounds good, and it's fun to have that stuff available. I mean, more than anything, getting back to like where the ego comes in, it's fucking nice to like have that stuff up. It's like a lot of your life spent doing these things. And I've done a lot of things that, very few people have heard, or a small amount of people have heard, or, or no one, or whatever. And so that trajectory and that arc is so, there's such a disparity. There's such like a, hills and valleys in there, that it's just nice to have, as a kind of a completist, to have it as much available as I can. So it feels really nice. It feels like it sort of fills in some of the gaps, you know?
Yeah, I think that's the hard part too. When in certain eras where there were, there are tons of bands coming out, and I like you just remember all these bands that you saw, and like why weren't they more well known? Why isn't there more stuff that I can own physically from them? Why and to
Right.
see this nice little resurgence of let's be honest, it's at the age where we are, where we have we're
Nostalgia,
still
baby.
probably, yeah, we have that nostalgia look. We also are, grown-ups, but we're kids with adult money that want to go back to when we couldn't afford when we were going to shows because
Sure.
we could only afford the ticket and maybe one beer, and couldn't help really truly support the artists that we should have at the time, buying their merch, your merch, or whoever's, and being
Sure.
able to do that now, it kind of gives you that nostalgic feeling. But it's like, okay, maybe I could be doing my part now, but now I actually own this and I have this, and it's never going to go away. So it's always a great feeling to have.
Yeah. And again, it's just like one more. I mean, I think that, James, Will, and I, outside of a few years, have kept in touch. Like, I mean, there was a big gap between James and I talking for not a whole lot of like common sense reasons. It wasn't like a big falling. It was just sort of like the way that it ended was kind of awkward, and and life happens, and then 10 years go by, and you know what I mean? All those things sort of they just add up. But in on the whole, being in contact, I feel like it's just one of those things that we were, it was really important to us at the time, and that it ended, and they kind of did, like, Will did some different things, James did some things actually sooner than I did, immediately after, and then I kind of took like a grieving period for
Yeah.
lack of a better description. Kind of, I just didn't know what the fuck I was going to do. I felt like I had put everything into this, and this was my thing. There was no plan B. I had moved 3,200 miles to play with Will, and we started this band, and James was the guitar player, and he was always the guitar player, and then it was done, and I just kind of didn't know. Like, I wasn't old, but I wasn't young. It's that, like, again, like that real middling period. And so I took a little bit of time off, and then kind of I did a couple project things that I'm really proud of, but they just, for whatever reason, like timing again with other members and stuff. No big deal. It just was like other priorities, and quite frankly, it was right up the crux of when people are kind of deciding, okay, I need a career, so I can't really do this. It gets to a point where you get a booker, or you get somebody that really wants things to happen, and that happened a couple times. um, and just the timing was weird because of other life responsibilities. So then I started doing solo things after that, and that was really born of me going, well, like, I guess I kind of like, writing songs is what feels comfortable. This is what I want to do, and so this is the available avenue to me now, as opposed to breakout solo, whatever.
Yeah,
So
and that's always funny too. Like when I'll have conversations with people, and I've always been the person when I like a band, like I follow everything. So it's kind of like why a creation of the show for me is because, like, if I like a band and the band no longer exists, I make sure I follow every step of what everybody else is doing, because I'm sure I'm going to find another band from that band that I liked, because,
sure.
and it's just like one of those things. And having the conversation I had with someone the other day, I'm like, yeah, I'm like, Josh has like 5 solo albums, dude. And he's like, what? I'm like,
Yeah.
yeah, like that's the
Welcome.
yeah. I'm
Yeah.
like, that's the thing, is like, if you keep up and you care enough about music in a band, like, you're always going to find something. Sometimes some bands just absolutely go away and you never heard of again, and everyone just goes on and punches the clock and goes on to a regular life. But like, real music creators and people who need that outlet and absolutely love music will always constantly find a way to create it. And I love now too that it's easier to find that way and keep up with it.
Yeah, for sure. It's easier to track those people now.
Yeah.
I mean, the world of Spotify's and Apple Music's really make that more feasible. But and in terms of like making music and doing that stuff, I think it was really one thing that I will say, and this goes back a little bit to the collective ego of the band and stuff, is we were really adamant always that we were going to do things for art's sake or for creativity's sake primarily. We have different eras that are perceived as like, oh, this is like their, more commercial era or whatever, like if you can even consider our time period and era, but you know what I mean, like
Yeah.
the existence of the band. And I think about that stuff and I think, yeah, some of that's, the producer at the time or the collection of songs or the sequencing or what have you. But everything for us was about doing something that we were enjoying at the time. And then when I finally got over, the fog of not having the band anymore, I was like, this is a true north for me that I shared and, with these guys that I love, that's going to continue on, which is I want to make records. I want to leave stuff behind. It feels great. And it feels like something that I'm getting better at. And it is one of those things, so many things deteriorate, but, writing, drawing, making music, there are a lot of avenues where your time in counts for something and you can actually better yourself, or you can do, you can incorporate your new influences and what you've learned over the years and song structure and all of that stuff. And so it just felt like I made one and I was like, wow, like that was kind of a weird, demoing some weird stuff and not having everything exactly like I wanted it, but it's finished and here's a one record. And then you get a second one done and pretty soon you're 5 in.
Yeah. And I think that's a big thing too nowadays, where people and I've gotten into arguments with people sometimes about this, but when a band has been around for, let's say, 25, 30 years, and then you start having conversations like, yeah, I haven't liked the past 3 records. I love the first 3. And I'm like, well, that's fine. The first 3 are always there for you to listen to.
Right.
But you have to understand that the band and the members of the band are allowed to change and get older just like you did. So their influences change, their lives change. So they're writing about different things and everything changes. And instead of just saying, I don't like it, sit down and listen to it and then tell me exactly why. Like, I've given people homework. Okay, tell me exactly why you don't like this new album.
Right.
Instead of just saying you don't like it. And if you can give me viable reasons and I can't, come with a counterpoint, I'm like, all right, hey, listen, you are 1000% correct, but it's also you're listening to it at a different time. It's just like being a kid when you're 10 years old and Bruce Springsteen is the biggest thing in the world and you're like, I don't understand any of this and I don't like it. And then you become 40 years old and you're like, oh well, okay, now I get it. It's just not for you at that time.
For sure. And that happens. Like, I'm like the reverse engineered in that regard. I'm from, like, my uncle is a bass player in the Oregon Music Hall of Fame and my mom was a music teacher. And so for me, hearing that, like the big shit, like the top 40 stuff, a lot of that, I'm in love with it from day one. It was the weirder, it was the other way, like when I discovered some of the gnarlier stuff that I was like, ooh, like, I don't know, that I had to find my way backwards, probably like Benjamin Button.
Yeah.
Yeah, like I always loved like the Springsteen stuff, but like but again, I love the stuff that is like pop single sort of stuff. And I love album cuts also, like I'm on Fire, something that's like 2 parts or something. I know that's Unborn in the USA, but that's as good as anything on Nebraska. It's beautiful. It's gorgeous. It's an incredible song, just like a little sort of arpeggiated guitar line and it almost sounds like a drum loop, but it's just a real reverb back drum part. And his vocals, that sort of stuff stays with you. And then, you might contextualize it different later on. But I was always like, like before I could afford music, it was all radio for me. And I just listened to the radio like incessantly, like constantly. So I think about that and I'm like, of course you like this stuff, whether it's good or not, it informed this portion of your life,
Yeah, no, and I mean, let's touch on that for a second here. I mean, your mom's a music teacher, your uncle's in the Hall of Fame for playing bass. And when you were a child, was it constant music? Like, do you kind of maybe remember the moment you heard something as a child that just made your ears stand up and you really want to know what it was all about?
I can tell you 2 songs that are, so I can tell you, I heard a Van Halen song coming out of a car driving by, a muscle car. I grew up in North.
I was going to say, what was it? It was either a Firebird or a Trans Am.
It was probably a Yeah, probably a Mustang of some sort
Yeah.
is my guess, I grew up in North Portland, this area called St. John's, but like effectively, if you had to break down the demographics in a really like unflattering way, you'd kind of get like a lot of white trash. And in that regard, we had tons of like, it was a lot, it was like, and it was also the era. So you're like, skateboards, BMX bikes, metal,
Yeah.
hockey, and and muscle cars playing those metal records. So to me, I'd hear like Van Halen, and I was like, ooh, that was you hear like Panama, and you're like, this is great. I think this is great. I don't know what this is, but I think it's great. And I knew who Van Halen was, but not super well. I remember hearing that, and then I remember hearing probably within like a month or two of those bands, like Police and Depeche Mode, and I loved all of those. And then I had a friend Ben who had an older brother who had all these metal records, and I got to hear like Iron Maiden and Judas Priest and these other things that were, to me, I didn't quite. I kind of got that it was dangerous or like dangerous sounding at the time, to me. And it's so funny because it doesn't sound that, it's like Game of Thrones, the soundtrack to me now. You know what I mean? Like, it's like there's so many camp elements to metal, but when you're a kid, when you're like in single digits, metal seems like, ooh, it's
Yeah, it was
this
dangerous. I mean, that was when,
dangerous.
taking my brother's Iron Maiden tapes or Black
Mm-hmm.
Sabbath tapes and
Mm-hmm.
going to a friend's house and sneakily listening to it because Tipper Gore said it was bad.
She did indeed.
That's the kind of thing where it was like, that's what I loved about music too, was because it could feel dangerous, right? It's not, but it felt dangerous. It
Yeah.
felt like you were doing something you weren't supposed to do.
Yeah, and I was fascinated by that, but I was just also in love with, I don't quite know what it was. I wasn't, the first instrument I played and what I played for years was violin. So I played violin, and so I'm not playing guitar, I'm not playing drums, but I'm doing things like I'm stealing boxes from, like our recycling and paper bags and pillows, and I'm drumming in my bedroom because I really wanted drums and my mom wouldn't get me drums. So we went to this, I can't remember the name of the place. It was like this neighborhood place, like a Sherry's type place where it had like pie. You
Mm-hmm.
could get pie on like and somehow we ended up purchasing like a full pie for like me and my sisters or whatever. And then when that pie tin was done, I grabbed that thing and washed it out and snuck it up to my bedroom. And that was my like symbol or whatever. And then I would just like play the radio and like drum poorly along to these things. And then eventually I borrowed a guitar from one of my dad's friends. I didn't grow up with my dad, but he had a friend who played some music and had lent me this like beater guitar that they didn't use, and started like trying to learn things poorly, and poorly being the operative word. But and what I quickly found out, I think, is that I just loved songs, and it was fun for me to try to figure out stuff, but it was almost more fun for me to try to make up stuff. And and so I think that those things kind of all happened at the same time. And with it was a long time before I ever articulated that I was writing songs, if that makes sense.
Yeah. No,
But
I get it.
but it probably was going on before I realized it in some form.
So
So
was violin mom's choice or
violin's
your?
absolutely mom's choice. So
Okay.
this is like anybody who's played a classical instrument as like a kid. There's this method called Suzuki. It's like a very
Mhm.
famous ear training method, and Suzuki is primarily like you play violin or piano, typically one or the other.
Well,
And
yeah,
so I think
I'm one of the 93 million that mom made him take piano lessons. So
yeah, so it's funny because years later I wish I'd played piano. I can hack my way through it, but it's unimpressive for as much as I should know about it. But violin, and then like, and so that was just like the thing that I was given this choice, quote unquote, and that was what I chose until like I kind of resisted when I was preteen, and then I think I played it for like another year and change, and then kind of finally got out of it. And then of course later on, you're bringing people in to play strings on your record. You're like,
yeah.
I should have just, like I'm rusty, like I could get through this, but there's, their intonation is so much better, and their vibrato and all these things that I sort of like, I had let fall by the wayside because I was, hacking away on the bass. So it's funny. It's ironic how that stuff turns out, but I think I would have wound up doing something in music or art no matter what, because my brain, the way it works, it's hard for me to imagine otherwise. So,
When you get the guitar, right, and you start kind of cultivating and putting together songs, did you kind of rush out, as you know, because most teenagers, when they get an instrument, they try to find like-minded people that have other instruments and create and spend more time on a band name than and a band logo than ever
mhm,
learning songs. Like,
mhm.
was that like kind of your, did you progress that way, or
I didn't. So it's funny. I had this friend Eric, and I can't remember his last name, but this is like a middle school friend, and we both kind of liked rock music for, like, and I was kind of getting into metal more, and that being very like loosely based, I mean, but anyway, getting into metal, rock, that sort of stuff, like heavier stuff, just in general, and this is kind of pre my punk phase, I guess, or like hardcore, whatever you want to call it. But he and I would play in his basement. He had like a split level in the basement in his place. He was a drummer, and I would play guitar poorly out of like a little tiny amp and try to do like whatever things I could come up with, and they were all like twist and shout. I mean, it was all
yeah,
like four chord, whatever. And at some point, I don't know when it was, but I just realized like guitar is not the one for me. And I started playing bass because my uncle played bass and I could bother him and I could figure out songs easier. I was like,
yeah.
oh, I can learn that bass line in like 5 minutes. I like this. And it made sense to me. It's root note melody stuff. And so really, I would say that it wasn't until I started playing bass and had done it for a little while that bands in any form or fashion came into play, like really legitimately, you know?
Do you remember the name of the very first band you were part of?
Um, Not really. I remember a early named one was Two Bit Terrorist that was named by the singer. I was not the singer. Who was this punk kid that knew a ton about punk, Jesse, and we had a song called Weekly World News where he would get that tabloid,
Yeah,
and
the newspaper.
yep, and he would just read an article out of that latest edition like live when we would play over a song that never changed.
Yeah,
Um,
Bad
yeah,
Boy
yeah.
rises again. Yeah,
Well, yeah, and then but that was original music, and I was playing bass, and I was playing bass fast, and my influences were, primarily like The Cure and stuff. I learned a bunch of I had like a Cure greatest hits, I think it was, and I learned a ton of bass lines just from that. So that was some of my first stuff, was like, I don't know, just
it's a
learning.
great way to learn. I mean,
Yeah, learn Fascination Street and learn, like all those things.
yeah,
Because there's very few bands that you can hum the bass line and know the song. And The
yeah.
Cure is absolutely one of them. Like, you can go through a ton of Cure songs, and if I hum you the bass line, you're like, oh, that's this song, or it's funny.
Now
Pictures
you,
of You, or that's.
yeah, you keep throwing that word punk out too. Like, was that like a scene that you kind of fell into,
So
for lack of a better term, in the area, or
so
well,
in Portland at the time, like the earliest things I did, there was a band that I was in that was renamed a million times. This is kind of after that band I was talking to you about. I was probably about 17-ish, 17, 18, right around there. And we were like playing, and everybody in the band was about 10 years older. I don't even know. It's what kills me is I don't know. I do know how. The guitar player, I knew this guitar player, and he knew these other guys. And they had played in some other bands, this band, The Obituaries, which was a kind of an iconic Portland punk band. The guitar player, Johnny, that I played with early on, again, he might not have been 10 years older. The drummer definitely was, but he might have been 8 years older or whatever. And anyway, and the the girl Monica that sang in The Obituaries is noted as an influence to like Kathleen Hanna and Courtney Love. They've all referenced that band. So I was playing like with the guitar player from this band early on. And so he just wanted to play everything like downstroke, Ramones, fast.
yeah,
And I was young and like bouncing up and down and thought it was cool. And so we played these terrible shows, like with 15 bands on the bill at Satyricon, which is effectively like the Middle East of, it's like the, no, it's the Middle East or the Rat of the West Coast or the CBGBs of Portland. It's like that sort of thing. A ton of iconic bands have played there over the years. It's just like a dirty little club in Old Town. And it existed for forever, and then it shut down for like a decade almost, and then reopened for another few years, and now it's been gone for a decade,
Yeah.
but or not that long. But point being, an iconic club. And so that was one of the only places that I could get shows, because they would let you sound check if you were underage, and then you had to go and wait and come back right before your set time. So I would go and sound check with these guys, and then I'd have to go sit at the Burger King that was like a block away and just like hang out, hang out
Just
and wait,
wait.
read the local music rag, and maybe there was somebody to hang out with, maybe not. Maybe I was just eating fries or whatever, and then I go back over there and play. So
Yeah.
that was like, and the punk stuff that I'm talking about then would have been like, before I was playing, I was aware of through friends like Poison Idea, stuff like that. Big bands that were a huge influence on me once I got into them. But then I also had all of that other stuff. I had all like, the Cure and the Depeche Mode and the Clash and the, Van Halen
And all the
and
top
everything else.
40 stuff you listen
Yeah,
to.
exactly. So
Yeah.
for me, I always recognized the hooks in things and wanted it to be hooky. So it was fast because of my friend Johnny, and it was hooky because of me and Johnny, probably both. But so that was early days, and then like that band went through a couple different kind of configurations and ended up getting signed by Tim Kerr, which was a local Portland label that at the time when we got signed, this is like right before I moved to Boston, basically. So this is like I was probably, by then I was probably more like 1920, something like that, right? Somewhere right
Yeah.
in there. And this is maybe a year before, something like that. And Tim Kerr put out Dandy Warhols, if you knew that band.
Yes.
And,
Very well.
Everclear, and a whole bunch of bands in Portland at the time. They and they signed us for a 7-inch. We recorded a 7-inch with Slayer Hippie, who was the drummer of Poison Idea. He was an engineer and a total wild man who OD'd a few years ago. Anyway, that was a wild experience, early recording experience with this kind of guy who was notable in that scene, and super cool to us, but also like intimidating and weird. All of those things, in the best sort of way. But he recorded this thing. They had ads for it, and then it never came out because the label was kind of bankrupted by a compounded thing. The label manager owner had a bad cocaine habit, and Everclear had a bidding war going on, and Capitol Records was forcing them to contractually oblige and put out the remainder of their contract. So what they did is they still owed, I think they owed a 7-inch and a 7-inch. No, they owed an album and an EP. So they put out that World of Noise, which was their album. They put out World of Noise, then they put out this EP right afterwards, and all the label's money went to putting that stuff out. And then our thing just kind of got shelved, and I was like, fuck it. And that was right around the time that Will and I reconnected, and I moved to the East Coast to start 6x7. So that
Wow.
was that trajectory. But yeah, I don't know if that probably sounded very circuitous and convoluted, but that's the way my
I
brain.
followed.
Cool.
Everyone will follow. Now, from that moment that starting as a young kid and you're playing violin, I'm sure there were recitals and stuff, but like, do you kind of remember the feeling you had the first time you were like truly in a room full of strangers and you knew all eyes were on you to perform?
Yeah, I mean, yes and no. I can definitely tell you, like, I've had, of course, we're back to the peaks and the valleys, but I've had moments where I was like, oh, like, get me off. This is, like, I don't want to be doing this right now. And then the opposite, where you're just in the moment and having fun. And I think, like everything else, it's just like repetitions. It's just like muscle memory. And I always have like sort of good sort of nerves before I play, but it's never, I just want to be in the moment, and not to sound too much like a hippie, but just, I want to just kind of experience what's going on. You spend so much value, you put so much importance on like that, that was our best show ever, or that was a terrible show, or whatever, or like you dragged on that beat, or like, I fucked up the middle eight or whatever, and then you get down and you're hanging out with people later and they're like, that's the best time I've ever seen you play.
Yeah.
And you're like, that was my worst show ever. And or like, that was perfect. Like you killed it. And somebody's like, yeah, it was fun. It was a little low energy or whatever. You get like a close friend that's giving you like the real, and then you realize you're like, I have no perspective. That's not what it's about,
No.
And so I try to be like, I prepare. I guess that's like the closest thing. Like Attempt Survivors just did a one-off show in LA and I had to prepare for that. And yeah, like that was a
Well, preparation is key in almost anything that you do, and when you can kind of tell when people wing things, right? You feel there's a different vibe and a different feeling of things that go on when someone's not prepared for something, or and I just, it's the same thing with anything in life. Really, I do these shows. You talk about like that little maybe butterflies before you do. I get it before I do every show that I do.
Yeah, it's good. It's good.
It's a good thing, because then once I get going and I get over my stupid ramblings at the beginning of every show, because I'm still have that little bit of anxiety going,
sure.
Then you just fall into the pocket. But it's also preparation. I prepare for, I try to listen to every single thing possible, read every single thing possible on an artist that I'm going to be talking to, because otherwise you just have a monotone interview and you're just like, okay. But it's the same thing. Every show that I've done that I think has been the worst show ever, people are like, dude, that interview was awesome. And I'll be like, what? That was fucking okay, whatever.
Yeah.
But it's just like anything in life you do. You prepare, and I tell people, it doesn't matter. Like, if you can only prepare 10% of what you're doing, at least you're preparing a little bit. So it makes life a little easier. So if you have the time to do it, try to figure out how to work it in to prepare for anything you're going to do in life.
Yeah. I think that what I meant by that, practicing or rehearsing or whatever, is like, it's this music and creativity is this weird mix of like the work behind the scenes and then also just like channeling something that's hard to articulate. And so I think that trying to find that balance, but I realize that I'm not, nor will I ever be like a session player type person. So I have to get my shit in check. I gotta sit down and play through the songs and be like, oh, I forgot that transition or whatever, because you're bound to make a mistake doing something and you want it to feel as loose as it can based on your preparation prior,
Yeah. And so we went over the first time you performed. Do you remember the first concert you ever went to? And did you get to choose that first concert? Was that something mom brought you to?
No. Oh, okay. No. The first concert that I remember is my uncle. My uncle was in a rock band that nobody would know, but it was on A&M for a couple of years in the 80s. And he opened for Tom Petty. And I went and saw him at a stadium open for Tom Petty. And don't remember Tom Petty, but I remember him because it was my uncle and that's what we were waiting for. And so that
what was your uncle's band's name?
Like, it was called Johnny and the Distractions, and they were they were on A&M Records, and they made a couple records, and then I think the band got fired, including my uncle. And then there was and the singer was told that he was the star, and he went and made a record that nobody listened to. It's just one of those cliche
age old fucking.
Absolutely
70s and 80s stories of
totally
you're the star. Well, I asked because I write it down because now I have to go find it and I'm going.
Oh yeah, and I think there's some of that stuff on. There's a couple of great songs. I'll text you the songs that you should hear.
Oh, awesome.
It's like it's got like that Springsteen, kind of connection. It's like it's that 80s rock thing. Like it's somewhere between Jay Giles band and it's got. But they were great live, and they did a lot locally, and he was a big motivator for me for everything. I just thought he was the coolest. He's still cool. He's still maybe the coolest. I don't know. But that was an early one. I early on I saw Stevie Wonder early. I saw the Who early. Both of those were really good for different reasons. I got drugged to the Stevie Wonder by my aunt who had like an extra ticket, and I was like, ho hum, but then it's Stevie Wonder and you're like, oh shit, I saw Stevie Wonder.
And then you're there. Then
exactly.
You're there. Like,
wow. The Who I loved as a kid. And so when I saw the Who, I was super excited. And it took them, halfway through 3/4 of the set to hear anything that I really knew, because the the tape that I had gotten from an uncle was a greatest hits, so it was old.
Yeah.
It was not current stuff, you know. So
It-
that was kind of funny. But I love the Who too. Big influence on. I think Pete Townsend is one of the greatest songwriters ever.
well,
Yeah.
bold.
Yeah. I mean,
Yeah.
it's and I can substantiate it. I mean, it's like everything else; it's subjective. But
No, exactly. That's like I would say
yeah.
Tom Petty to me. You know, that's mine.
What's that? You say Tom Petty's yours?
Yeah,
Oh,
Tom Petty's mine.
absolutely, 100%. I mean, even the bad stuff is not that bad.
Yeah, exactly.
And you want to talk about later records, you go through and you're like, I don't really care about this record, and you'll hear like, one or two songs that are like, oh, like even like You Wreck Me and stuff. That's way later than the popular era, and you're like, that's pretty damn good. He kept his true north till the end, was just like making records that those guys just were smiling at each other in a practice space.
Yeah.
And you lose some people and you gain some people, but it doesn't really matter because there's this whole catalog of goodies.
Now, do you have a band in your life or an artist that's that constant that I look at it as I always say this, Rolling Stone will ask you what your favorite band is. I'm going to ask you the band that you constantly turn to that never lets you down, like that when you don't know what you want to listen to, you always find yourself listening to it.
Oh man, that's so tough. It would probably be records, but that's so tough. And I know this is a cop-out answer, but I think it's because I really, really, truly love so much music that's really difficult for me to think of like if there's a thing,
Yeah. Well, if there are some records that like you always go to those records, or
I mean, Purple Rain. I'm a huge Prince fan. I love, Michael Jackson's Thriller, obviously, like that's a massive one. Damn the Torpedoes is great, and a million other Tom Petty things, honestly. I mean, Full Moon Fever as a solo record, incredible. Depeche Mode, for sure, Black Celebration. That's one of my favorite records ever. And then, Violator's the obvious one for people, but Black Celebration for me is the one, just because of when I heard it.
Yeah, it's funny. I literally just bought Speak and Spell today.
Did you?
Yeah.
That's another one. I've said this in other interviews. I don't get interviewed that much, but like over the years that Martin Gore is one of my favorite songwriters too, because he writes a lot of those songs on piano or acoustic guitar, is my understanding. Almost all of them.
Yeah.
Pretty rad when you consider how they come out or what they're how they're treated.
Yeah. What the finished product is.
Yeah, for sure. And then there are records that are like I think because of eras and because of things. I mean, I definitely love Heat Miser, Elliott Smith's band.
Yeah, that's Elliott.
I saw their like first show. I bought a demo tape at that show. And there's a couple songs I seeing those songs performed live before I ever heard them recorded had a big effect, and there's other Portland bands like that. Like that. I think Red House Painters. I have
Red House Painters. Yeah.
Particularly Down Colorful Hill. That was like a massive, like heart-wrenching breakup record for me, and still is. I'm just like, I can't. That record is just, that's like a headphones. If anybody does this anymore out there in internet land, headphones like lying on your back, like falling asleep to record, just incredible, And otherwise you want to fast forward to it because you just can't. You have to get yourself there. You have to get yourself there to allow yourself to be there. But it's so, and it's not a perfect record. It's got a lot of like weird stuff going on, but it's perfect for me. Perfect to me. Anyway.
Now, okay, so we didn't land on one band, and I'm okay with that. But I kind of got your style. Of what
maybe.
What it is that you like.
Oh, Slayer, Rain and Blood. There you go. That's
okay.
one.
Well, that completely changes the trajectory of the entire things that you were just saying before. But I understand that as well.
It does. I got it on cassette at Everybody's Record Tapes and Video down the street from my house, and I was in bed again, like listening to it on my Walkman or whatever that was, right? Some sort of cassette thing that I had a couple of them in the house. And it's however long it is. It's like, 26 minutes long or whatever it is. It's short. It's the same program, both sides.
Yeah.
And I remember listening to like the Raining Blood and all the stuff at the beginning and being like, I don't know. And then the music comes on and the band comes on, and I think like that 5-minute period where I'm like, this is the worst thing I've ever heard to this is the best thing I've ever heard. That transition. And I've said this before, but it's very, very honest. That was like my trajectory for them. You know, I knew that they were a cool band, that they were cooler than what I was into. So I took the chance. And then when I got it, I was like, fuck, you know?
Yeah, the band that kind of was like that for me was Sepultura. And when I got
Sure.
Sepultura's Arise,
Yeah.
and the same thing, like I knew I wasn't going to be allowed to play this in the house without headphones on. And I remember putting the headphones on and being immediately frightened.
Right.
And not knowing if my ears or my music palette at the time could handle it. You know, I was very, punk rock kid watching skate videos, getting music that way. But by the third song, I was just like, I'm enthralled. Like I'm all in. I don't know what this is, and I may need more of it. I didn't really go hardcore down that major hardcore thrash metal scene, but that was the record that said, hey, guess what? There's something out here that could scare the shit out of you, blow your mind, and make you fall in love with something that you've never heard before.
Right. Yeah, that's the best. That's the best sort of thing. It pushes the parameters wider, you know, which is the greatest thing about music.
Well, music is, I'll say it again, as I always say it, music's the greatest thing in the world because it is the only thing out there that never judges you and is always there to lean on, no matter what.
That's right.
It's always there to lean on.
Yes.
Now, I'll since we started talking about it, I'm going to get to what you're currently doing after this, but
yeah, no worries.
This is a question that may be hard to answer. A lot of people usually find a little stress when I ask them the question, but if no one ever heard the band 6 Going on 7,
right,
and you had to play them one song and you could only play them one song that you would say best described the band, what song of that would you play?
Man, I mean, I would definitely like so I'm gonna answer this in the way that makes sense to me, which is I'm considering the demos, I'm considering the 3 records, and then the things that we've done since then that we've sort of like messed around with. And I would say
it's got to be released so people can find it. So
of course, I would say it's definitely a song off Heartbreak's Got Backbeat for sure. Like that much is this. That's our starting point.
Yeah.
Because
mine's off of that.
What's that?
Mine's off of that I would play
because it splits the difference between kind of the first and third record in a weird way, and also because the first record has things that people associate with the band that are more a product or a byproduct of the brevity of the recording time than the style of the band. And I know, and I've explained that to people before too, but like the tape machine broke over and over and it got repaired and I had to do all my vocals, like blast through them. It was the last thing to be done for that record. So my voice was shot. So people are like, his voice is all smooth on the new one. And I'm like, yeah, partially because I got more than a day to do, 12 songs or whatever, a day and a half. But it would be, man, this is so tough. I'm going to say Portsmouth. I'll give you one. and then How to Sell the Brooklyn Bridge. Those are two, and I could really go with a couple other ones too. But I feel like those both have the things that I want to hear or that I want to promote from those guys, which is like interesting drumming. Um, Portsmouth is much more of a backbeat song for Will than like How to Sell the Brooklyn Bridge is.
Yeah.
But there's cool guitar stuff in both of those, and there's cool upfront bass stuff, and
Yeah.
there's the sort of cynical somewhere between like one of those songs is a little more cynical. That's Brooklyn Bridge, and then the other one is melancholy, I guess, or nostalgic. And I feel like those are the two poles that I operate between most successfully and honestly.
Yeah. And those,
Bitter and sad.
yeah. So those are like number 2 and 3 for me, but in
Okay.
reverse order. And mine was Reverse Midas.
Yeah. Okay. I had a feeling. I don't know why.
It's like Reverse Midas, then How to Sell the Brooklyn Bridge, and then Portsmouth, and then what I try to do is like if somebody doesn't know a band, like I'll make my own little EP of their collection of music. So it's it's like those 3, and then Sincerely off of the first album, and it's like I'm like you're gonna figure it out real fast, And I also love it because there is there's differences in all of them, and if you're a music lover, you can hear it. You can hear the differences in the songs, and you can find ways to fall in love with. I asked the artist to pick one song, and I'm the asshole who gets to pick 3 to 6 when I give it to people. But
it's good.
it's also, I like to see where your mindset is and why you picked that song, because to me that is also why you created them, and that's what I love about it.
Yeah, I mean, and one song is tough when you're trying to encapsulate a band. It's a little bit easier because we were a trio and we kind of had like a thing that we sound as, a lot of times we would reverse things. Like I would write something really hacky on guitar and be like, these chords. And then I'd give them to James and he'd be like, that's a terrible chord, but how about this chord instead? Like, just like the song structure. And then we would reverse engineer stuff and he would start kind of doing his arpeggiated parts and I would play root notes on the bass and a lot of chords as well. And Will had sort of like somewhere between just groove drumming and a little bit of like mathy drumming. And so I don't know that all of those things are represented on either of those songs, but there's like a mood or a tone to what I feel like is our best stuff. And I feel like Brooklyn Bridge, Reverse Minus has it also. They have that mood and that tone. In fact, I think that record overall, like if there was like a mood fader on the on the board when we mixed it, like it definitely got mixed in over all of those. It has this thing,
And listen, it falls into my category. That album it's an unskippable album. There's not, there's not one thing I would take off it when I was listening to it.
If you skip a song, it's 9 minutes long, so it's good.
Yeah. So from that era ending to you constantly creating music, doing solo stuff, and being a part of other things along the way to now with Attempt Survivors,
right.
What was that trajectory, and how did Attempt Survivors become what it is now with the album out and the sound that you guys are creating?
Yeah, I mean, that's one of those things that, I was friends with Adam Marino we were label mates. 6 Going on 7 was on some records in New York with Errortype 11. And then he was in a million different sort of like bands that came after that were kind of like variations on a theme. They, had a couple core members and they made a record on Geffen under the moniker Instruction. And then they were in a band called like Fires after that had some cool stuff. And they just kept going and going. But I've known him for a long time and we've kept in touch just over the years. And he finally was a West Coaster after a long time. And I had been back for a while and I don't remember what the conversation was, but he had been doing this thing. He'd been demoing these songs and he was playing with the drummer from Helmet and all this stuff. And I was like, oh shit, like who's singing on this stuff? And he's like, we can't get any, like they just kept having like failed attempts with these things. And I was like, let me give it a crack. And so I sang over a song, which I was like, I don't think this is going to be the song. I actually was in the studio for a solo record and I just used The End of a Day to sing over this track. And I wasn't in love with it, but I was like, like, let's see. And then I kind of came back at him and was like, I think I'd arrange this way. This bothers me that this goes here. I wouldn't do this part. I like this part. And we kind of started our journey there. but we did a lot of what I've done before, for better or for worse, in project things, which is I'm a big fan of being like, okay, cool. Let's basically scrap all these ideas and start writing, you know, like these are cool, but like, cause I feel like it allows you to be whatever it's going to be, that configuration, those combination of people. And so that first record is not entirely that. There's a lot of things that were like Adam riffs, like early things, but there's a lot of things where he'd have like an A part and I would like play us into a B part or a C part or sing something and be like, okay, no, now do this, you know, and kind of direct in that regard. And then there were other things that were much more complete that are like, he's got the A part and the B part. And I'm like, these are just two riffs, but that's definitely like, there's your chorus, there's your verse, or we kind of like squabble and get, you know, figure out how we wanted to do it. And it was just a lot of fun. It's like somebody that I love, and it was easy in that regard. There's stuff on that first record that wouldn't have been my choice for the songs that we picked, but like very in a very diplomatic way. Not like I don't like them, but you know, if I was going to be, if it was a solo record, I would have been like, this one stays off because of this, you know, but we don't always, it's nice to have that balance. And he's also very, like myself, very opinionated and can substantiate why he thinks something. And, you know, and I respected that, and we had a lot of fun. So when we got ready, we did a 7-inch, and we'd never all been in the same room together. At that point, the guitar player did all his stuff from the East Coast, and we recorded it with the guy that does a bunch of stuff for the Melvins in LA, Toshi Kasai. And Kyle tracked it on the Dale Crover's drum set. we did our 7-inch, and that was the one that was on Iodine. And then we were getting ready to do a record. We had a lot of songs written by the time we recorded that 7-inch, and those were newer songs. And we were kind of going back and forth between trying to find a label and just like do it total, like, you know, Ian MacKaye style, and just like put it out, you know, because we were like, what is this? What do we want this to be? How much are we going to play? Do we want to just make a record we're proud of? And kind of, you know, and we recorded it with Jay Robbins in Baltimore.
Nice.
And that was a really fun experience. I'd never met him prior to that. And we had a good little, like chemistry between all of us, and had a blast, and we made it. And that was the record. And then after that, we kind of did a couple East Coast and a couple West Coast release shows, a la Adam's other band, Saetia, where he just does all this flying around for these crazy, you know, fly to Philadelphia and New Jersey for a show, you know, fly to Chile for 3 shows. You know, we're not going to Chile, but that example, you know. So we did that, and then we made a record. And I had said after that, I said, you know, like on to record number 2, you know, he and I both were just kind of like, let's write another record. Let's keep going, you know, because that's the fun is, you know, we don't want this to be like a one-off, never hear from us again thing. You know, it's cool. It's cool to develop that stuff. So we got about 7 or 8 songs written for a new record, real close. And they're great. I'm super excited, and everybody in the band gets along great. Kyle is on tour with Helmet a lot. Adam does his Saetia stuff, and he's a barber in San Diego. And I teach like martial arts in Portland, and try to do solo stuff as much as possible. And I'm working with 647 as well. So that's all going on simultaneously. So we're all busy. But
well, I mean, I can hear some of the excitement when you're talking about it. And creating music and doing what you do. And that's the stuff that gets me excited for, okay, there's going to be more. Hearing your excitement makes me excited for, oh my God, okay, so this is going to continue. What's next? Like, I can't wait to see what's next.
I can tell you for sure that like in 2025, there's at least 2 things coming out. That's that much. That's as far as I can say. You know, there's 2 those things could be any number of things in any number of sizes. But I will also indicate that both of those things that I am referring to are new things. Or I should say new, you know, as opposed to, and then there's a bunch of things that could come out that would be kind of compendiums and complement the 2 really cool Iodine reissues. You know, that's just kind of like figuring out what needs to be out and what's like a little bit like too much. Like we don't need to put that out. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I don't want to go down the Elvis Costello road where it's like you get a record plus an entire 40 songs of B-sides, you know, connected. You're like, wow, this is like every song you wrote for this record, and I don't need to hear 25 of them, you know?
Yeah. I mean, there's so much.
As much as I love you, you know, that's not necessary. It's the same. Ryan Adams has the same chip,
Yeah, someone needs to filter certain people at certain times, and those are those great things where it's like you didn't need to do that.
Right,
Okay.
and I'm not even that prolific, so it's not like I'm sitting on that sort of stuff. But I've always like really valued like when there's the intention behind stuff, the intention of like a record. Like if somebody dies in a tragic accident, then like scour the archives for everything. But otherwise, make the record you want to make. Don't
Yeah,
make, don't make me listen to all your songs that were almost as good as the one that you chose to put on there.
and that's a big thing. I'm working with someone right now to issue their album for the first time on vinyl, and
Mhm.
I'm pushing them to go into the archives, find me. I know there's 3 songs at
Sure,
least that you really wanted to do that you didn't for some reason. So let's find those, redo them, and put them
sure,
out
sure.
on it. So yeah, there's always that. Don't bring all 40 that you worked on for that album and
Right,
put it
right.
out. No, let's find the 3 best and let's do that and give it something else, something else for people to go back to fucking 2001 and be excited about
Yeah,
that. And oh my god, here's these 3 songs that I never heard before.
for sure. And like demos, sometimes demos have some really cool energy and like I mean like demo tapes, but also like
Yeah,
demos for songs that were like recorded later. There's all sorts of fun and you'll get the occasional live track from some college radio station where you're like, that's good. That's got a good energy or that's really fun or like listen to that banter, you know. We were young once. All of
yeah.
that stuff. It's great.
Well, I love that we how your excitement. So I usually ask what do you got coming next? You answered that. So
Yeah, yeah.
I got another question for you before we move on to our final segment, and because
Sounds
I don't
good.
want to take a lot of your time. Final question. It's the end of a world question. It is a meteor's coming in, crashing into the earth. You got 5 minutes left to live, and you can't get out of it. You have to listen to one song. What song are you listening to?
Oof, man, you are killing me with this. One song, the end of you know, what am I doing? Oh boy, man. I multiple things pop into my head, but I'm going to be rather than trying to give you like a cool answer.
Hey, I don't need
I
a cool
think,
answer. I want to know what
yeah,
popped in your
yeah,
head.
but I'm thinking I'm going to say Def Leppard Photograph.
Wow, that's my favorite Def Leppard song of all time.
Of course it is.
I,
It's a
it's
great
yeah,
song. And because I want to sing. If we're going down in
yeah.
flames,
I
let's
sing that at the
sing
top of my
together.
lungs anytime it comes on, and I get told to shut up a lot. So
Unbelievable. There's an unbelievable like where you're going straight to my head, that head note
yeah,
while the guitar riff plays out underneath it. I mean, I get chills talking about it. You can't see me, but I swear.
no, no, that's awesome. I love that. I love that answer. That could be right now one of my favorite answers of all time. I
Good,
think
good.
upper,
I thought of other things that were like, oh, that's cool. But I'm like, am I being honest or am I trying to? Yeah, that's anyway.
yeah.
That's a good
All
one.
I all I got is a photograph. Awesome. Well, so before we move to our final segment, and I'll preface it, you might want to pull up something, which is our weekly threes. It'll be 3 things that you're listening to. You give your 3, then I give my 3. But prior to doing that, I'd
What do
love
you
to
mean?
give
Like 3 songs I'm listening to?
3 artists that you're listening to that are the
Okay.
3 most recent things that you've really enjoyed listening to.
Yeah. Okay.
But prior to that, I'd love to give you this opportunity right now to tell all of our listeners and all your fans how to find everything that it is you're doing and to keep up with everything that's coming.
Oh yeah, absolutely. So go pick up the reissues if you like what we do at Iodine Recordings. That's great. I think that all their stuff is through Death Wish, I believe. I'm
Yes,
terrible with that stuff, but
it is through Death Wish. So
6 going on 7 on Instagram. Joshua English on Instagram, Attempt Survivors on Instagram. That kind of covers the bases of those 3 things. 6goingon7.com has a website that's effectively just a email thing. You just drop your email in, and that's a really good resource for finding out what's forthcoming. Attempt Survivors has the identical thing, and I as well, under Joshua English Music, have the same thing. Those are all good ways because they're direct connections. We're just renting space on social media. So when that shit goes away, that's a way to keep in touch.
yeah, awesome. Well, we are now in our weekly 3 segment. 3 things that you're listening to that you'd like people to check out. You give your 3, then I give my 3.
That I want people to check out. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. I mean, I'm going to say the Pioneers, really great reggae band. Um, the last song I listened to was Cecilia by Simon and Garfunkel. That's another great one. And then I've been listening to Drain a little bit again recently.
Nice.
So there's three. Those are three that are on like my most recent things. So that's I'm not trying to overthink it.
No, that's great. Drain to Simon and Garfunkel, the pioneers. I love the all over the place.
Yes.
That leads to what we've been talking about.
Perfect. And you on your end?
And on my end, so my three for this week. The first one is a band called Semantics. They have an album called I Feel It All at Once. They're an Australian indie emo-ish rock band, I would venture to say.
Cool. I'm looking.
Number two is a band called The Love Buzz. They have an EP called No Buzz, and they're an Irish power pop band. And for anybody that listens to this show, you know how I feel about power pop. It's just good grungy guitars, great vocals, great sounds. So The Love Buzz. And last but not least is it's a moniker for an artist. It's called Euphoria again. It's called, the name of the album is Waiting on Time to Fly. It's singer-songwriter Johnny Klein. He's also a member of the indie band out of Philadelphia called Knife Play. But Euphoria, again, if you like the singer-songwriter, it does have a little bit of those Elliott Smith tinges to it.
Yeah.
Very downtrodden type of sound to it, but good lyrics and great meaning behind it. But those are the three things I've been listening to.
Very cool. I just texted them all to myself, so I'll check them out.
Well, Josh, I just want to, before we get out of here, I want a big heartfelt thank you, first off, for spending over an hour with me, talking about your life, being open and honest about everything. And thank you so much for creating the music that brought us together. I don't want that for people to mistake that the music is what brought us together. And through music, you can meet so many different people. You can have so many different conversations, and you can find out that we all have so much in common, and we can get rid of all this fucking division we have in life and understand that, two people can come together through a common bond. And a lot of the times it's the best bond is through music. So, give it a try sometime. So thank you for creating that music that brought us together, because this has been one of the, best hours of my day so far. So thank you so much.
My pleasure. It was great talking to you.
But everybody out there in the world, you know what time it is now. It's time to go out, listen to 6 Going on 7, Temp Survivors, and Josh English's solo stuff, and have a great fucking time.
A respectable second, but the memory's different. And I'd rather forget feeling around for that home. Might as do the touch and toe on her back in her bed, smiling at the ceiling. 5 years ago in a picture, with a smile that's satisfied forever.
Thanks again for tuning into the Hidden Tracks podcast. We hope you enjoyed this week's show. Don't forget to follow us on Instagram at HiddenTracks99. Also, send all your submissions myhiddentracks99@gmail.com. Tune in next week. You may find your new favorite band, and don't forget to go out and have a great fucking time.